Change isn't just coming, it's already here. This is Ask for Change podcast, hosted by leadership expert Meridith Elliott Powell. Brings you weekly conversations with leaders and experts who are redefining success in a world of disruption. Let's begin today's journey and turn uncertainty into your competitive advantage.
That's exactly what we do every single week. We turn uncertainty into a major competitive advantage. I am really excited about today's guest. I've been studying and researching her for quite a while, and this is such a good topic for us to dive into as it relates to uncertainty and how you really succeed to it. I want to welcome to the show Elke Rubach.
Hi, Meredith. Thank you for having me.
Well, I am excited to have you here. I mean, you're a powerhouse. I mean, you're a sought after speaker on wealth management, estate planning, and philanthropy. But if we had to say what you do is you help families really get their house in order by getting real clarity as to what they want and building their confidence in their financial planning. But it doesn't stop there. I mean, you do countless charitable work with charitable organizations, and you've really built this firm. But oh my God, when I was reading your background, you are fluent in English, Spanish, French, and German. You've got undergraduate degrees and graduate degrees in law, as well as going on to specialize in the area of wealth management. So for those of you listening, Elke, tell us a little bit, how did you get on this journey, to becoming such a force of nature? And so it is evident when you read about you that you are so passionate about the importance of wealth management and financial planning.
Well, thank you, Meredith. Well, let me tell you, I am the byproduct, poster child of what happens when uncertainty hits. So uncertainty certainly defined my life. In theory, my original plan, born in Mexico, was to be a lawyer and then go do my master's in the US and then work in New York for a year and then go back to partnership track. But of course, life said, not happening. And I got a scholarship in London at London School of Economics, did my master's there, loved living in London. I said, I'm not ready to go back I certainly didn't want to go to New York. I wanted to stay in London. And I started working at a Canadian law firm that I had met in my previous working years. And then Argentina goes belly up, uncertainty again. And they asked me to come to Canada to help out with a bankruptcy for a year.
Okay.
So that was 3 kids ago.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I've been in Canada for 23 years. And after being in law, I love the field of law, incredibly challenging and fun and interesting and passionate. But I needed something that allowed me to impact people more directly than through a merger and acquisition. But then moved to one of the banks, and it hit me right there. People made financial decisions without a proper plan, without sitting down, really following the noise, the uncertainty, and not owning their own financial journey. My job was to be the bridge between clients and advisors, making sure that the investment advice was compliant and sound and so on. And it usually, like 99% of the time, it was. But the problem is that people never sat down to say, what am I trying to do with this? Mm-hmm. And you have people in their 50s, 60s that wake up one day and they see there's all this noise at home and all this noise outside and the news and the media and the markets and up and down and right in front and center, everything doing flips, and they freeze. So I started the firm 13 years ago with the idea of helping people normalize the money conversation, understand where they're standing, make informed decisions based on numbers, not on emotions, all that. Fast track it, 5-6 years in, people would say, what do you do? Well, I do a lot of things. And I thought, that was not a good answer from a marketing perspective, from a clarity perspective. So I engaged a branding expert, and it was so obvious that what drives this passion is my story. When I was little, normal family, mom, dad, kids, houses, et cetera, et cetera. My dad died at 50, and I think my dad thought that my mom had it. My mom thought that my dad had it, and in reality, nobody had it. And that's when uncertainty hit, right? Because we had a couple of properties, and one was sold, and then the other one was sold, and then now we're renting, and now you're being pulled out of school because you can't afford tuition. And when I became a planner and advisor, I used to get really, really angry when people didn't follow the advice, because I know that if you're humble and open and not arrogant, planning is easy. It doesn't have to be rocket science. You don't need complex structure. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But the vast majority of Canadians and the average American doesn't need something incredibly sophisticated. They need clarity, they need ownership, they need to take the bull by the horns. And even if they've never done planning, at whatever level of affluence, they owe it to themselves to have a clear plan for them and their family. Kids should not suffer the uncertainty caused by parents' irresponsibility.
Why do you think and I think this is such a universal problem. I don't care where you are in the world. Money seems to be this taboo we don't talk about. Money seems to be this taboo we certainly don't plan for. And I'm just curious from your perspective, what you found to be the reasons why.
Um, I think there are many factors that happen. Literally ignorance, because they don't know. They don't teach financial literacy in school. You can tell, the periodical table A to Z, but you don't know how to balance an account, or you don't know, how to optimize for taxes. So when people don't know how to do it, they freeze because they see it as a daunting task to learn. My advice for that is, I wasn't born knowing this. I learned it, and I learned it, trial and error, and little by little, and finding the right people around me, and doing it. So if you start it at some point, the second time is a lot easier, and the third time becomes second nature. So not knowing is a big one. The shame of accepting that they're messy is also a big one.
Yeah.
And the sheer volume of news and commentary and negative news, people just freeze. I think it's fight or flight, and unfortunately, most people freeze, and the mess continues.
So one of the things that you mentioned, and I think so I want to go back to your story a moment, because I love the fact that I think when people are driven by their story, they're functioning at a whole different level, right? It's like you're so driven with a passion that you don't want anybody else to experience, what happened to you. So in essence, your father passes away, I'm assuming unexpectedly, correct?
Right, at 50.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
old, 50.
Right. And your mother's there to basically pick up the pieces and pick the family together. And there was no financial plan.
Correct.
Yeah. How did you all navigate through that? Like what was the story beyond that?
I think if you ask my mom today, her ongoing response is, I have no clue. Like, I don't think she had the time to figure it out, right? The first asset is sold, and then it gives you a little bit of cash flow to deal with it. She started her own business, and my two older siblings were a little older, so they were on their own faster. But she did have my sister. Like, I'm 6 years younger than my eldest and almost 7 years older than my youngest. So she did have like a sachet of kids, different ages, to look after. How she did it, she still to this day says, I have no clue, but we did it. So she started her business, and her also in insurance, and it's different in Mexico. Insurance is a different thing. There's no real planning. It's really more insurance only. And little by little, she built what she still has it today, and she still works. And I think she'll work until she decides to swap sides on the grass side of things. Yeah. But but it was a necessary roughness. Like really, it was hard. Sometimes we were in Mexico, you have help, right? It's much more affordable. And we were with the intern or the cleaning lady for hours on end,
Yeah.
and missing mom, and she was, scrambling and making ends meet, and working, and it was not necessary.
Yeah. So when you talk about the fact that, I love the fact that you started with clarity. And I think that's hard for people to even stop and think about what it is that they want as it relates to money. So I want to start there. I want to talk a little bit about the messiness too, because I think that was the biggest thing for me when I really got hold of my financial well-being. Where things really started to turn for me was being honest with what a disaster my finances were. But I want to start with clarity. This idea of even thinking about what it is that you want. What's the process? How does somebody go about that? Because I think where most people are is I want to pay my bills. I don't want to be freaked out if something comes in unexpectedly. And I just want to be able to go to bed at night without thinking I owe people money or terrified the phone rings. But I imagine you want me to think beyond that as far as money goes, correct?
Absolutely. And the funny thing is that people think that wealth management means, I'm ultra rich and I have somebody accumulating wealth for me in the stock exchange. And as long as that's happening, we're good. No, 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 no. If you don't sit down, so it's an invitation for people to stop and think and go slow to go fast. If you don't know where your accounts are, if your family doesn't know where your accounts are, if you haven't talked about how much money you're spending on a monthly basis, whether you're living paycheck to paycheck or whether you have millions in the account in your bank accounts, those things might get lost. You have to slow down and you need to sit down and really say, what am I doing and why am I doing this? Wealth management is a lot more than just investment accounts. It has to have cash flow planning, which is code for how much do you spend every month, and are you aware of any waste, or are there any things you can cut or optimize or change, or etc. There's future planning. What are your goals? Where do you want to go? How do you want to get there? What's the most efficient way to get there? Plan it, have the conversation, bring everyone to the table. You accumulate, but you also have to protect. You need to understand your insurance needs. And it's not just life insurance. If you can't work, are you protected? And some people can self-insure, but let's have that conversation. Let's really run numbers and see if you can self-insure or not. The vast majority of the population, no, they cannot. And you can be as arrogant as you want and, follow your golf buddy or your, soccer buddy's advice, but unless you have a plan for yourself, it's not going to work. And then I can give you the best financial plan. It can have all sorts of bells and whistles. If you don't have a will and the appropriate powers of attorney, I guarantee you that it's not going to work. Period.
And for what reasons? What is the significance and importance of a will?
Well, first of all, do you want the government deciding how to split your stuff? Like, do you trust the government enough to be wise enough to understand that your family dynamics to split your assets in a way that they would do it and not the way you would do it? When you do a will, you get clarity on what you have. It's an invitation to have a conversation with your executor and your powers of attorney. Right there, very often the spouse is the executor and the power of attorney. There, you're facilitating the conversation. You're gaining ownership on your future. And I'm not saying a will is done once and you forget it. Things change, and that's our job,
Yeah.
to make sure that the plan, the asset accumulation, the asset allocation, diversification, all that stuff, and as things are added to your table, the will adapts, right? It doesn't mean you have to change it every year. There are ways of doing it properly, but there's a point where the will doesn't hold enough volume of what people have accumulated, right? So it's keeping all the pieces together, and that's what I mean by getting your house in order. It doesn't matter who you talk to. There's always one element that's missing.
Yeah.
And unless that person sits down and thinks, hey, could I be missing something? Reading the label from inside the jar is impossible. Go out and ask people who do this day in and day out. Be vulnerable and say, hey, am I missing something? Or am I okay? The worst thing that's going to happen is that you're okay. I see zero problems with that.
Yeah, me too. Where does somebody, let's start with the fact that for anybody listening to us, and I think there are a lot of people out here they're not the slightest bit proud of their financial situation. I used to be a banker. I was a banker for years. I was always amazed at people who lived in these big houses, had these unbelievable cars and these lifestyles. And then I would get into their financials and they did not look pretty. I mean, they were literally really, 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 really slim on any cushion at all. If one thing went, it was a house of cards. If one thing went wrong, they were going to be in trouble. And then you have the other spectrum, there you are just living paycheck to paycheck and, kind of like your mom, you're just trying to keep everybody afloat, everybody fed, and you haven't even thought, that. Where do you begin to deal with the messiness of what your finances are, even to begin to get a handle on what your finances are?
I think you need to take responsibility and accept that there's always a better way, and digging your head in the sand does not fix anything, doesn't help anyone, and nobody's going to come to your house and try to help you. Reach out to people who do this for a living, right? Who are independent, who are not following a corporate mandate, who can sit down and have a conversation with you and say, what do you want? Like, what do you want? What are you proud of? What are you scared of? What have you done so far? What did you enjoy? What do you understand? What are you not clear on? And it starts with a conversation and admitting that you don't know everything, and there is no benefit in freezing or avoiding it because you're ashamed of not having done something in the past. And the problems might not be as bad as you think they are. You just need a bit of a helping hand, an extra 360 review, or you might not be aware of a massive problem. And taking really the bull by the horns is the only way.
How much is, would you say that anybody who's willing to get some clarity, anybody who's willing to deal with the messiness of where they are, those two things combined really start to move you in the right direction?
Absolutely. And when we meet with people, we are not just testing for what they have, right? How many dollars we can manage or not manage or so on. We're really testing for fit and readiness. We want people who will be open, who will tell us all their dirty little secrets, because then we can diagnose properly, right? And we're looking for people who are ready to take action. And it doesn't mean that you're going to do everything overnight. It didn't take you 2 weeks to get into the mess you might be in. You're not going to sort this out in 2 weeks, period, right. The end. But we do need sufficient information to be able to diagnose properly and then send to the right solutions. And we're not going to do everything at once. I love analogies, and I tell people, pretend you are in the ER with me, because by the time they show up, I know that there's a problem, or at least they're curious, right? With all the confidentiality bells and whistles in place, I need you to tell me everything, right? If you did drugs, what's hurting, when did it start, what's your family history, everything, so I can send you to the right specialist. Otherwise, I'm going to send you home with, an aspirin, water, and lots of rest. And that might not solve the problem. I need people to be very open and ready to take action and own their financial life, because otherwise it becomes a really, really draining process. Like, if they're not ready, there's no point.
What should somebody be looking for when they're looking for a financial advisor, when they're looking for somebody to talk and meet with? What should be top of mind for them?
The right connection where they feel comfortable opening up, the right expertise, years of experience, the right team that has enough 360 view to help them. I mean, credentials, sure, to an extent, because some people write exams, but they're not really advisors. And I am a big fan of independence, neutrality, and there's no such thing as a free lunch. We know that. Free plans, free this, that's crazy. Like, when have you gotten free legal advice or free? When has something free of this seriousness worked out?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, that old adage, you get what you pay for, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got a book coming out soon called Get Your House in Order. Tell us a little bit about that book.
It's really meant to help people gain comfort in knowing that they're not alone, but they have to take ownership. And we tell stories and we show why it's important to own and really drive their financial life with intention. And financial life is not just your bank accounts, right? It's your career. Who are you? What's retirement? What does it mean for you? How do you want to live? Do you know your number? When is that enough? When can you start helping others? When can you help others? Because some people help others without knowing whether they're throwing the baby and the bath and the water together, right? So it's gaining clarity, owning it, being an adult, really, and understanding that it's not that complicated if you're willing to do it. And it's meaning to your professional life. For the most part, people want to protect their family. They want to make sure that everybody's provided for, protected. And the importance of doing that on an ongoing basis. Like, you go to the gym because you want to be healthy. Going to the gym once
isn't going to get you there.
Correct.
Yeah. So when is your book coming out? Do you know?
Oh, I don't know. The editors, probably next year. I'm hoping next year. And it's a daunting task. I hadn't done it before. It's exciting, but it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but it's exciting. It's nice to have your thoughts all in a place. And then when people ask you for advice or input, it's nice to be able to give them a book or suggest they get the book, because it's an easy way to answer everything that you would be struggling to tell them. Is it ever are you too young to start doing this? Is there ever a point that it's too old, it's not worth it?
No. Well, the only time where it's too late is when you're dead.
Yeah.
Period.
Okay.
Now, with the boldness that defines me, yes.
Yeah.
No, it's never too late, and I'll tell you why. How much impact and how much you can really steer the boat when you're 85 planning, questionable, but at least you don't leave a mess. Everybody has a legacy, and you choose whether it's a nice one or a messy one. And how do you want to be remembered? You know, dad left a mess, or dad left it as best as he could, right? But I'm a big intergenerational teaching person. If you're in your 60s, you're showing your kids in their probably 30s that they have to do it, and you have the conversation. And then the 30-year-old, they have the advantage of time, right? So the impact is so much greater. I can show you 2 financial plans with relatively the same amount of assets and the same structure, more or less between 30 and 60 or 70. The way it looks going forward is just crazy. But then the 30-year-old that might have a kid or 2 is also showing them that this is needed, that this is not impossible, that both boys and girls can learn this. And that's where real equality will kick in, when people are financially literate and can make decisions based on facts, not on emotions.
Yeah. So true. Oh my gosh, Elke, this has been really valuable. It's hard to believe we're coming to the end of the podcast. Always end the podcast with 2 questions, and you can answer them either way. The first one is, how do people find out about you? How do they get on the waiting list for your book? How do they learn more about your speaking engagements and the things that you offer? And the other is, we're recording this at the time when we're really staring down the barrel of 2026, and 2026 looks to be loaded with just as much uncertainty, if not more, than 2025. What thoughts or advice do you have for anybody worried about their, financial safety and their view of their finances as they go into 2026?
Absolutely. So to find me, the first question, it's very easy. My website has all the contact information. It's www.rubachwealth.com. So RUBACHWEALTH.com. And I'm very active on LinkedIn too. So it's just first name, last name, and happy to connect, happy to bounce ideas. We are licensed in Canada, but I also have colleagues in the US that I work with, so we can do cross-border planning. And in terms of what to tell people as 2025 wraps up, how is 2025 different from 2024 than 2020 or 2001? Uncertainty is here and it's a permanent. If we knew the future, we would all be rich, right?
Yes.
And the last thing you want is to find yourself in 2026, December or whatever it is, saying another year went by and I didn't do it. And another year went by, you paid taxes, you growled because you hate paying taxes, but you didn't do anything about it. So if it's not now, then when? And really, uncertainty is here to stay, period. And now you're healthy. Now you can make decisions. Take advantage of that and take responsibility, because you are affecting not only yourself, but your family and your colleagues and your employers or your employees. You don't live on a mountain yourself, right? And that's it. So
Yeah.
be responsible and own it.
I love that. I think, probably the biggest takeaway that I'm taking from the time with you is that just how much others around you are watching you. And if you have children, if people around you that love you, anybody younger than you, even anybody older than you, taking that first step, you're just such a tremendous role model. Not only will you be healthier financially, but you're going to impact. I love that you said wealth is intergenerational and people are watching. My dad always paid his credit cards off every month. It's exactly what I do too, because he just didn't live in debt. And he never told me that. I just always learned it. So I think that's incredibly important. I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. You've been an amazing guest. I'm excited about the book and hope you'll come back when the book is out there and published. And audience, we hope we see you right back here next week for another episode of Ask for Change, the show where we dive into the strategies, discuss everything that you need to know to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. We'll see you next week.